Hello, collective listeners. On today's episode, we have Pat Lewis. Pat Lewis is a strength and conditioning coach with the Charlotte 49ers, working with Corey Bell, who we just had on recently, not hand in hand, but at the same school. But Pat, I followed for a while on social media. I've been really impressed with the stuff that he does with his athletes, particularly body transformations, things that I think matter a lot within basketball. So he's a high-level basketball strength coach. Really excited that we got him on the podcast, and I loved recording it, so I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for listening. What's going on, collective listeners? On today's episode, we always kind of talk about having like selfish guests for me. This is something I followed on Instagram for a while. I think he does a fantastic work. John Bloom, a previous guest that we had, recommended kind of his work and what he does. And so this is Pat Lewis, Director of Men's Basketball Sports Performance at Charlotte. How are we doing, Pat?
Doing well, man. Appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. I think this is going to be a really interesting episode for listeners too, because there's a couple things that we were even talking about pre-show, right, pre-recording, but then things that I've noticed on your social media that I think you do a little bit differently than other coaches that we'll definitely get into. But, just to start it off, can you kind of give me your background in athletics, strength and conditioning, and then what brought you to Charlotte?
Yeah, 100%. So growing up, my dad was a colonel in the Army, and so grew up in a very strict household. When he was, growing up, he was actually a power lifter when he was in the Army. So he used to compete, and he was like one of the power lifters in the Army. So he had me in the weight room when a very young age. So I kind of always enjoyed that side. And then I went to the University of Florida, where I was a walk-on the baseball team there, and it was an unbelievable experience. I was able to be on a national championship team there. Had played with a lot of really good players, but I wasn't really talented enough to make money playing baseball. So then I kind of went the strength and conditioning route. I started interning there, and I got connected with a guy named Preston Green, who was the head strength coach for the men's basketball team there. And I interned there for a year. And then in my second year, I was interning again. It was my senior year, and our assistant strength coach left, and I got along really well with the men's golf team, who was who that assistant strength coach was in charge of. I got really along well with the men's golf coach, and I got along well with all the players, and everyone actually got thankful my senior year to get the assistant strength job for the men's basketball team. Um, I worked there for another year, and then one of our assistant coaches at Florida at the time, Jordan Mincy, he left and went to Jacksonville, where he took me with him to be the head strength coach there for men's basketball at Jacksonville University, and then now I'm here at Charlotte.
So did you say you became an intern when you were still actively in school in Florida, and then you became the assistant your senior year?
Correct. Yep. So I became an intern in between my sophomore and junior year of college, and then when I was 21 years old during my senior year that fall, it was like October, and our assistant strength coach for men's basketball, he left to go be the head guy at UMass, and his name's Zane Scott, really good, great friend of mine. And when that happened, I just kind of got promoted my senior year. So I was, very like blessed and thankful. But a lot of it kind of was, so the men's golf team was kind of who that spot was for. And I got along really well with the men's golf coach, and he just kind of walked in and was like, "Yo, I want Pat." And then, Coach White got along with me, and, everyone at Florida kind of was like, "Yeah, Pat's, kind of." I got really lucky from that standpoint. So.
Well, I I wouldn't call it luck necessarily. I think with an opportunity like that, it's more speaks volumes to the work that you did. But I mean, that's an awesome experience. Was that like a struggle? Because I mean, like you talk about as an intern, right? It's a different deal. But then being an assistant coach is next level, especially when you're kind of at that same age range as the athletes.
Yeah, honestly, I'll be honest with you. My senior year that fall, when I got promoted to the assistant strength coach, I was in a 1030 sociology class, and in my 1030 sociology class, I sat in the front row in between Andrew Nimhard and Keontae Johnson, and they were both in my 12 o'clock lift group, and so that obviously had like a unique set of challenges. But obviously, I think with Preston being who he was, he kind of let me be like the cooler assistant. I got to pick the music, things like that. And then if there was ever like a situation with like, like disciplinary things like that, he kind of took it over. And so, obviously gave me a chance to grow and mold into that. But yeah, there's, you talk about like the guys, looking at you as like someone their age. It's like, yeah, man, I was in class with you 30 minutes ago. So I think, yeah, definitely unique circumstance.
Yeah, you're literally sitting next to them and then immediately going to that lift afterwards. But I mean, I guess it gives you a unique experience too, because a lot of times the guys will come in and say, "Man, see, you don't know how hard these classes are," so you would immediately know, right, if they're BS or not. And then our listeners too, they're going to notice a trend is that the basketball strength coaches I speak to, most of them are connected to Preston Green in some way. The second trend is also that every basketball strength coach who works in any frame with basketball, if they have a second team, it's going to be one of the golf teams. I don't know if you've noticed that too, but I mean, I've got men's and women's here, and then I've got women's golf. I know Darby Rich at Memphis had men's golf when he was there his first time, so it's always kind of that connection. But how's your experience working with Coach Green?
Oh man, Preston's unbelievable. He's somebody that he when I was 19 years old, I started interning for him, and I asked him what hypertrophy was the first question I asked him on the first day, and he like exploded at me. He got so mad, and I was like, dude, like I don't know what this stuff is. But obviously, he had a really way of teaching it, and when you're kind of just immersed in it, so I'd get there, 5:15 in the morning to set up for golf, and then I wouldn't leave till Preston left at 7 o'clock that night as an intern, and you do that for a year and a half, you'd be surprised what you pick up and what you learn, and so obviously he gave me a lot of different material to read. Poliquin Principles was the first one. It was the first book I read in strength and conditioning. He made me read it the first week I was there. After I asked him what tempo was, but he hated the questions. But no, he's an unbelievable guy, and obviously our relationship really grew throughout our 3 years there, and obviously he's someone that I looked up to, and now he's a very close friend of mine that I talk to, a couple times a week, just because of kind of the impact that he had on my life.
Well, I mean, those mentors are super valuable, right? As people who you trust and will also, I mean, like exactly right. Like, some people may be listening and I don't know, to me, it feels like a different type of relationship when somebody can be real with you. And even if it's that first question you ask, like, you're mispronouncing words and everything, and they're like, what the hell is this dude doing? Right. But they are real with you. And so, once you develop that relationship with them, you can always go back and ask them questions like that. That reminds me of, so I came up in football. I was with Craig Fitzgerald at Tennessee. And I'll never forget, he handed me The Strongest Shall Survive, and so I'm a big Bill Starr guy, all that kind of basic principles. But it's funny you mentioned it. It just brought up this old story of mine. I remember one day it was like 6 p.m. Everybody had left for the day. And like, I mean, dude, I just moved to Tennessee. I was living in Philly before. I have zero friends, so I'm just hanging out in the weight room. And Fitz was like, hey, you want to get a quick pump? And I'm like, yeah, why not? And so it's like a 3x15. I'm like, we do like to finish up the 3x15. And then like, without saying a word, like we both kind of just move on to like the next exercise. And then like, after that, kind of just move on to the next exercise. Like it literally got to the point where I have no longer, like there's no more arm exercises I could possibly be doing. Like I just started like squatting, like in the, like running half gassers because the indoor turf was right there. And it got to a point where it was like, who's just going to quit in this moment? It got to like an hour and a half. And then finally Josh Palmer, who's now with the Chargers, came in. He's like, yo, can I get a stretch? And I was like, thank God, because that was a battle of wills and I was very much about to lose. But it just, you saying that reminds me of my time with Fitz, and just having those mentors is so valuable because those are people, again, who will be real with you. Will also let you know when you're in the wrong in certain situations too. And so I think that's just something that's like the tool that you can have. And what you said too, that's a friend for life.
Yeah, 100%. I'll never forget the first day of my internship. Pete told me that he's like, "Hey man, like we'll meet around 7:15." So like I had trouble parking, like the whole deal, and it's like 7:17, and I walk in the weight room, and there was a prowler set up for me, and he made me do like 10 suicides. I'm in the trash can yakking, and then he's like, "All right, go fold the towels," and I'm like, who is this cat? I don't I don't even know. And I'm lucked out. Like I don't even know who Preston Green is. And it's like, all these people around the world are like, blessed, and they pay money to come learn from him, and like, they like such a reverence guy. I'm like, dude, I don't know who this dude is. Just like somebody knew him that knew me, and like I'm over here puking in the prowler, and it's like May the 5th. I'm like, what is going on? Uh, but no, it was obviously an awesome experience that I was blessed to be a part of.
I mean, real ones though. I mean, that's exactly it. It's people who will teach you and also not let you not live up to your full potential. And that's something that was a big lesson for me coming up in coaching was like I don't really care about you unless I'm going to tell you you're not living up to your potential when you're not meeting those standards. So I mean, I'm grateful to my guy. I'm sure you're grateful to Preston as well. How's this? So this is the first year at Charlotte, correct?
Yes, sir.
How's the first year been going, man? I mean, I saw you're on a nice little win streak here, win over FAU started off too. I mean, how's the first year been for you?
It's been awesome, man. These guys here as a team are really mature. They're really bought into the process of training. They're bought into the process of practice, kind of the discipline piece, and they do really well with coaching, like embracing coaching, accepting coaching. And it's been really great to work with. We're on a little win streak right now, which is nice, but we lost 4 games by 1 possession in the non-conference, and in all 4 of those games we were up big, and then kind of got into a late game situation, and with FAU we kind of got into one of those late game situations, and we kind of got over that hump, and now our guys are a little bit more confident, kind of playing in late game, and we look at a lot of games and we're like, man, we really should have had that one. And so I think, kind of we went through that process, and those games were good for us. I think those losses are shared experiences that our guys have, and now that we're into conference play, hopefully we can keep going a little bit.
That's the beauty about basketball, though, right? Is I mean, at the end of the year, you have your conference tournament. You win that, you're going to the tournament no matter what, And so, I mean, I remember we were sitting at 1-2 at the start of this year, and I was like, "Oh shit," so, it was a tough little deal. It was, dropped one to NIU, who was a great team, and then lost in overtime in Oregon State, and then, we just started rolling from there. So, I mean, it makes a massive difference, right? But also knowing that you can go out and win that conference tournament, and then you're going to the dance, which is obviously every team's goals. But I said this was a selfish podcast, and the reason it is for me is because I'm big on body transformations. I like to pride myself, But if we're going to be real, I think yours kind of blow mine out of the water. If I'm just being honest, can you kind of talk to me through that process? One, can you kind of talk about the importance behind it? Because I do talk with other coaches, and I do feel that sometimes it can be a little easy for them to kind of say, well, it's not that important, right? It's about how they play, and they'll kind of come up with exactly right. That's my reaction. They'll point out guys like, like Luka or Chris Paul or, Jokic, like it's guys who maybe physically don't match, but they're kind of, cooking the rest of the league. To me, they're the outliers in those scenarios. Can you talk to me one just about the importance of body transformations, and then two, the process that you undergo with your athletes?
Yeah, 100% to start. So I think when you're looking at a guy like LeBron, for example, who's 37, you're not going to transform his body right now, right? Like, so when you get an 18-year-old, their body has to transform. All of those guys at some point are going to have to put more mass on their upper body. So really, really simple. If I put my training into one sentence, I kind of explain it as train the upper body for hypertrophy, train the lower body for longevity, right? So we want our guys to feel really good with their shirts off. That's kind of how I am with these guys, and just in transparency. So obviously it's not straight bodybuilding, right? But growing up a guy that's very Poliquin based and very things like that. There's a lot of strength and upper body mass that these guys have to have. Basketball is a contact sport. We would be kidding ourselves if it was not. And so kind of going from a transformation process with that, when you're 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, you have to put on muscle mass. You cannot put on muscle mass when you are 26, 27, 28. The older you get, the harder it is to put on muscle mass. So kind of starting with that in mind, there is an importance of, hey, if we're going to set these guys up to play basketball professionally, to set these guys up to play basketball for money, we're going to have to put on some type of mass in that regard. And then the second part to that is the number that, one of the numbers that I care the most about is their body fat percentage. And it's a really touchy subject, obviously, right? And I'm fortunate enough that I work with a men's basketball team, and that's kind of the only basketball I've worked with the last 6 years is men's basketball. So, sometimes that can be a topic. There's eating disorders are real, and there's a lot of teams out there that might have individuals that might want to struggle with this, and this might be like a touchy subject. Kind of, but with I've been blessed with kind of the guys that I've had that I'm able to have open and honest conversations about that. So one of the main things that I have to do is you have to impact nutrition, and so I do all of the food here. I do all of our post training shakes, all of our meals on the road, all of our meals after practice. I set up all the food here, and it's something I pride myself in is feeding these guys real whole nutrient food that's going to slowly, help them increase their muscle mass, but also decrease their body fat. Um, and so, looking at overall you'll see that, the lower your body fat is, if you're looking at our force plate numbers right now, like we're doing, all of these guys are hitting their lifetime PRs. And it could be just as simple as, hey, they're jumping with less fat on their body than they were before, right? Um, and so, training the body, the upper body specifically from a hypertrophy standpoint, there's multiple reps, set schemes, things like that I utilize, tempos, training through a full range of motion, something I believe in wholeheartedly. Utilization of, weighted chin ups, presses, pulls, variation of angles, handles, tempos, things like that. And then just training multiple times a week. All through the preseason, 8 hours and 20 hours, we lifted 5 times a week as a team. And it wasn't like a microdose 12-minute lift. It was about a 35, 40-minute lift through that time. And we push these guys. And if you look, ultimately as a team, what we're trying to achieve is we're trying to achieve wins. And so for that, we have to be probably one of the hardest working teams. So a lot of people, they might outthink themselves through, hey, the RPEs are high, or hey, like we want to make sure we get recovery, and like there's a time and a place for all those things. And we're now that we're in late January, early February, we might have like a couple recovery sessions. But when we're in September and October, like, man, we're gonna grind. We're gonna work really hard. We're gonna come in here and we might do 10 sets on an upper body exercise, and you're gonna be sweating, and then you're gonna come back in and you're gonna have to practice, and then you have to come back and you have to get your shots up, and like that's the process, man. Like working as hard as you possibly can together as a team every single day is what it's going to take for us to be successful in the long run.
It's funny you even bring that up, and there's a lot of things I kind of want to break down within that, because I mean, this may be confirmation bias for me, right? That's why I sought you out, because I really believe in the things that you do, because we, I have a very similar process myself. But even, like you said, we're late January, early February, right? I talked to a lot of coaches, and just to learn about in-season training, and I was talking to Ty Watson over at Butler the other day, and I was like, hey man, like after you give your guys a deload, do they look exhausted? Because I just noticed this trend. And he's like, yeah, they always do. So I don't deload. He's like, who needs a deload? And I mean, unless you think about it, right? I mean, it does make a difference in, I think, the mentality of training, but then also the physicality that you can bring to the court to continually train hard. It doesn't have to be like this whole, like you're saying, hour-long session, right? It can be a quick one, but we're still going to touch heavyweight. We're still going to train hard in the time that we're in here, and then it'll translate to the court, in my opinion. So I agree with that philosophy 100%. One of the things that I'm curious about is how do you test body fat, and what's the frequency for it? For me, I always talk to our guys. I call it the weight vest, right? For our weight loss guys, like you said, they're jumping lifetime PRs. It's because you took a 10-pound weight vest off. Like imagine like you're walking around with a 10-pound weight vest. You lose 10 pounds over the off season, all of a sudden you feel way better. But I think the body fat percentage is better than the numbers on the scale, right? Because it can teach us things or show us things that are more important. So what's the frequency? What's the method? And how do you go about it?
Yeah, we're really blessed here. We have DEXA scans here at our school, and that's set up through our kinesiology department. So whenever we're going to start our off season, so we'll say April, May, like, kind of depending on how far we go, I'll test all those guys. And then I'll get them again at the end of the summer, and then I'll get them right before we start the season. And so typically how I like to do it is over the course of the summer, we should see great increases in lean mass, right? And then when you go through that fall period of 8 hours where we're conditioning, that 20 hours official practice, you're going to see hopefully a big drop off in body fat. So right, like a lot of guys will still get leaner in the summer, 100%, but all of those guys, like when we were at the end of October this year, every single player on this roster here was at the lowest body fat percentage that they've ever been at. So like we have like all of their DEXA scans, guys been here 3-4 years, things like that. Every guy was at their lowest body fat percentage and at their highest skeletal muscle mass percentage, or from a skeletal muscle mass weight. And so obviously, there's going to be a point in time where we got to, like, I don't want to say cap it, but like Dwight Howard does not need to get any bigger, right? But when you're 18 years old and you weigh a buck 74 at 6'4", like you got to get bigger, man. Like let's just be really simple, really honest with you. And then ultimately the guys have to really want it, right? And so I think we look at like one of the big trends I see people talk about is like autonomy, right? Like giving these guys like autonomy in the weight room, things like that. And like, I don't necessarily gravitate towards that as much, right? Like I'm kind of more of like, this is what we're going to do. This is the standard. And like, if a guy needs to, adjust something, like obviously I'm not like, a dictator in those ways kind of, but one of the lines I use with the guys a lot, and they, they kind of like they say to me back now like we're a few months in, is it's your career, it's your money, it's your family, right? And so a lot of times these guys body composition, it comes down to what they do at 10-11 o'clock at night when I'm not there. And so I'll say it to them a lot, man. It's like, hey, it's your career, it's your money, it's your family. And so ultimately, if you want to make money playing basketball, which is something very hard to do, it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of attention to detail to how you sleep, to the food that you put in your system at night, how you approach your work, are you in the court every morning, things like that. And so I think that's kind of from an autonomy standpoint, putting like their success in their hands is something that we have to do as coaches. And I think in my role in the sports performance, strength and conditioning coaches, a lot of times guys are asked to do things on the team that may not benefit themselves, right? And so there's a team first mentality that we have to uphold, and something that I have to reciprocate in my training and the message to the guys. But hey man, you might have to come off the bench for this team to be like better, right? And that's really hard for those kids to understand and do, and that's awesome. But in my realm of strength and conditioning, nothing I'm going to ask you is going to limit your stats. Does that make sense? Like I'm literally only here trying to help you. So anything that we do together where we're getting like results and like where we're increasing performance, it's going to lead to an increase in your performance on the court. So I think like there's like a piece like with the guys, it's like, man, like don't fight it, right? And so these guys have been phenomenal, of buying into the process of training hard every day. And we actually trained every day up until conference play. So every -2, every -3, every -1, we lifted up until conference play. And so I think like giving those guys that like, hey man, this is every day. Something I always talk about is rent being due every day, because success is rented. And I think ultimately from an autonomy standpoint, when the guys understand like, hey man, this is my career, this is my money, this is my family that I got to take care of, you'll see a much greater like increase in performance.
Absolutely. And that's what my whole thing, every listener here on the podcast knows too. I'm big on the autonomy, self-determination theory type piece, because that's what my education background is in. But I would argue exactly what you're saying. It is an autonomy-based thing because it is more ownership of what they're doing, right? And mine is a little bit more on the back end, right? If I ever have a guy complain about, having to do a specific thing, like, a guy's always like, man, we got like eccentric squats today, everything. It's like, my thing, I always go, hey, I'm sorry, I care. My fault, that's my bad. I didn't realize we came here to get worse today, and they always go, oh, CA, come on, man, so, but I agree with you 100% on that aspect. It does force them to take ownership of it, right? And it reminds me of a similar concept from, I don't know if you've ever read It Takes What It Takes.
Mhm.
But it's exactly it right there, right? Is the illusion of choice that he talks about, where you think you have a choice in certain things. If you're a guy trying to lose weight, you think you have a choice in, are you going to eat 15 Oreos at 11 o'clock tonight or not, right? But you know what the right choice is. You know exactly what the choices that you have to make each time. So I love that coaching aspect that you're coming from of, it's your team, it's your choice, your career, right? And so I think that makes a massive difference in reminding them of the larger goal each time. Because too, I think it can be tough where sometimes I'll get frustrated where I'll understand certain things. Like, right, if we do have a weight loss guy, he comes back 5 pounds heavier after a Sunday. Like, I know what you did. Like, because I did it too. I'm 5 pounds heavier today too, because I've been slacking. So I know exactly what you did. Right. But at that same time, it gets frustrating for me. But as we grow older, right, I think it's hard for us to put ourselves in their shoes and understand that, we didn't really look at the bigger picture a lot of times. We kind of just lived in the moment, and I mean, I wasn't a college athlete, but I remember I wanted to be a strength coach, and I wasn't like out there every day reading, everything that I wanted to do. And somebody asked to go to a party, I'd say, yeah, I'd probably rather go to a party instead, because I'm 19 and I'm not thinking about having a future family. So I love that you bring that aspect up, and I love how you kind of continually remind them that it is all part of a bigger picture. It's, when people talk about stacking days, it's about building up to something in the future. So I think that's fantastic. You know, you talk about nutrition, and with I think that obviously that goes hand in hand with the body transformations, because my biggest thing is that you can do whatever in the weight room. It doesn't matter if you're not actually fueling, sleeping, doing the things that matter, like you said, outside of the weight room. Um, what are your kind of key points for nutrition? What are some ways you make sure that guys are adding mass? It's high quality mass, it's skeletal, lean muscle mass, like you're saying, instead of fat mass in conjunction with that.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of ways to approach it. I think step one is I weigh the guys in every day. And I write the number down, just like, when they come in, I look at the scale, write the number down. So I think that's something to, constantly, it's like the stock market, right? And so we're more worried about trends, right? Like, you're going to go up or down a pound. Like, hey, man, we practiced hard yesterday. You got to hydrate. Or like, hey, like, we were off yesterday. So, you might be up a pound or but kind of having constant feedback and kind of not being afraid to I don't want to say like manage the guys or like be on them all the time, but also being like, hey man, like this is the goal, this is where you're at. So like, be real, man. Like, honestly, like, are you doing what you're gonna say you're gonna do, right? Are you who they say you are? And so from that standpoint, there's obviously a relationship piece that you have to be able to have with the guys to have that conversation. Like, hey man, like, if you really want to be, the our starting center, if you really want to be like this person, like, you got to get to this number for us to, collectively be successful. Um, and it's obviously not just about like a number on the scale. But obviously that's the easiest way to have feedback that takes, a second or two. And then kind of going through that from a nutrition standpoint, whenever I went through the interview process with this job, um, I was, very clear of like, hey man, like, if I'm gonna do this, if I'm in charge of performance, like, I got to have a really heavy hand in nutrition, because I'm not gonna train the guys 5 days a week, and I'm not going to, have these guys right now. All through the fall, I train the guys in four groups, right? And so I'm not training these guys 5 days a week in four groups if we're just gonna feed them pasta after practice every day. And so I think from that standpoint, that's like one of the big steps. And then kind of going from there, one of the first things that I did here with is we had like the locker room was full of like Powerade, and I was like, hey man, it's got to go, right? Like, we can have an carb intra session, right? We'll have Powerade out of practice, but like, I'll never forget. It was like my first lift here, and a kid came in with 2 bags of Cheez-Its and 2 Powerades, and it was an 8 a.m. lift. It's like 7:50. He's walking down eating his Cheez-Its and his Powerade, and I was like, dude, there's no way. And I'm like, and you're at like 15%, man, like body, like, you're not lean, right? And so like, all of my challenge to my guys has been to get to a 10%, right? Like, get to a 6 pack. And I think like there's an aesthetic piece to training men's basketball where our guys, when they come in to train, like, they should get confident to a standpoint where, they come in and they train with their shirt off and, things like that. But it's not like Venice Beach, right? It's not what it is. But there's ultimately a different type of confidence that you have when like, hey, man, I've ate well, I've worked my tail off in the weight room, and now like when I'm in the gym and I have my shirt off, I'm like proud of my body, right? And so I think like that's the type of confidence I try to instill in these guys. Um, and it's obviously not just about aesthetically looking good, right? We talk about structural balance in our upper body from a training standpoint. And I get really detailed into all those things. And I look at power output, and all of our verticals are up, and like all these things are that we look at, all of our KPIs, all of our things that are like really matter, and we say like move the needle on performance. Like we're worried about all those things, and we're worried about our guys like mental health, and worried about like how they are as a person, how they are as a man. All those things are really important. But from a body composition side, really honing in on, hey, these are the things that we need to eat, and these are things that we need to do. And so really utilizing our breakfast early in the morning, right? And then going through that. So in my last school at Jacksonville, I actually had like two really big grills right outside the facility. And I used to grill the whole team breakfast every morning. So I'd go to the grocery store on Sunday, I'd get all the stuff for the week. And then, we'd come in the morning and we'd have steak and eggs, and then we'd hit clusters on squats. And then we'd come back later that day and practice, and the guys would shoot, and we would just work our tail off, man. Cause that's what this is it's constant work. It's constant, um, just of an understanding of like, hey, I got to work as hard as I possibly can every single day to put our team and put my family in the best position to be successful. And obviously, overtraining is a thing, and obsessing too much about like this food versus that food is a thing. But I think a lot of people don't understand like how hard you really have to work to get to those levels of success in their life.
Steak and eggs in the morning,
Yep.
clusters, just guys being dudes, man. That's all it
Yep,
is.
100%. And when you take an 18-year-old, man, 19-year-old, and you give them steak and eggs and you have them hit clusters on front squat, you like it's not right. Like, man, they'll blow up. Like
Oh
they'll
yeah.
they'll get leaned up, right? But you just have to have the discipline to do it every single day, and
Hmm.
right, and something that Coach Fern, our head coach here, he always talks about is like loving like the work and loving the hard and loving the routine, right? So like it's just a routine, man, but it's just like a way of like, we're going to do this, and we're going to do it every single day, and we're going to put our heads down, and we're going to work our tails off, and we're going to pick our heads up and kind of see um, how far we've came.
Well, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is can you handle the monotony of
Mhm.
training? I mean, especially in the summer too. Like, Maya always tell me, you didn't come here to play weights. Like, I understand that, but at the same time, I'm here to help you. And so, eh, yes, it sucks. Yes, Fridays are going to be a massive hypertrophy blast, and you're going to, absolutely hate it. But at the same time, like, can you come in every single day, give consistent work? That's our thing here too, is the consistent guys, right? It's not the A plus students and then the F students on separate days. It's the guys who can come in, get an A every single day. And so I think that consistency aspect is really massive. One thing I do want to bring up too, because I thought it was super interesting, just noticing through your work, is that you are a licensed massage therapist as well. How did that kind of build for you? How did that idea first pop into your head? How did you go about getting the actual license? Because that takes a significant amount of hours. And then, how has that helped you in your career so far?
Yeah, 100%. I think from working in men's basketball specifically, it's so awesome and so rewarding because the team is so small, right? I have 13 scholarship players, and so from when you only have 13 guys, and being blessed here at Charlotte, just being men's basketball, I'm in charge of overall performance, right? So we're doing blood tests on the guys, looking at vitamin levels, right? Like what vitamins does each guy need to be from a nutrition standpoint, right? Then from there, we're looking at all of our mobility, looking at different things that we need to get to from a joint angle perspective, right? How many degrees of ankle dorsiflexion do you have? And so when you look at all of the things that are like encompassing performance, I kind of look at it as like a circle of like, hey, here's the athlete, and then around it we have like a Venn diagram or a web, and you want to be able to have something in each bucket that you can add value and bring value to. And so from a recovery standpoint, and having such a small team, and maybe we have like 5 or 6 guys that are going to play like really heavy minutes. I kind of realized that having a unique skill set in terms of recovery would be valuable. And so when I was in Jacksonville, I went to massage therapy school, and it's a 500-hour program. So it was 5 to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, and I started March 15th. So literally, like, I think our season ended March 12th, and I went right up until sometime in late September, early October. So it was like right up until we started the next season, and so it sucked, man. I went 5 to 10 p.m. You have 500 hours of school. I think I had 300 1-hour massages that you actually have to do on like clients, and so I was at a massage parlor where people would come in, and it was just they would pay less because you were a student and not fully licensed, and there would be like a licensed person there on site, to like kind of like supervise you or whatever. But it's literally just like, a hand and stone, whatever, and you have to learn all types of massage. I don't think people talk about that enough. So I'm doing hot stone, I'm doing barefoot massage, I'm up on the table, and, kind of learning all these different things. And from there, you get a really good feel of like what tension feels like in the muscle, right? How can I release fascia? And from how we travel here, we bring the treatment table, and say we get in at 5 p.m. and we play at 7 p.m. the next day. It gives me the ability to grab our top 5, 6 guys, do 45 minutes with each guy, and kind of, I think it's something that separates, right? So if you're looking at all of these coaches, everyone out here is trying to get better, and we're trying to see how we can create an advantage in terms of wins and losses. And maybe it doesn't move the needle, right? I would be fooling myself if I thought we won an extra game because I was a massage therapist, right? Probably not true. But I think over the long run, as we stack up all those days, having that type of soft tissue treatment is obviously something beneficial to our program that maybe some programs don't have the ability to travel with someone that's a licensed massage therapist.
Well, I mean, that's super significant at the more mid-major level as well, right? Because I know of some teams who travel with a licensed massage therapist, but their budgets look way different than ours, right? And so, I mean, that makes you stand out. But then I think there's multiple levels to that, right? What I always talk to our guys about recovery too is do what makes you feel good, because I think when I look at the research, I think it's pretty similar results from a lot of things that you can do. So if you hate stretching, if you really absolutely hate going for mobility sessions, extra things like that, then find something else that will actually help you feel better. Like I know I hate cryo. I know I personally would never do it, right? But I know guys who absolutely love it. And so go do that, because to me, it ends up really being about how you feel. Like, do you feel like you've put the work in from a recovery standpoint? And so, I agree with your standpoint, where it's like you would never say like, oh, we won the game because that guy got a 30-minute massage last night. Like, it never would, and just even from the short conversation, I could tell that's not the type of personality you have, right? But at the same time, that's a 1% type deal, right? And then, okay, then we can look at other aspects of a program, and you can look at what everything a strength coach does in total, and that's where you can see that it really affects a program overall, right? I don't, when we go to an overtime win, I'm not like, yeah, because we absolutely crushed them in conditioning in the offseason. That's what, no, sometimes we just got, our shooters are just really on in that 5-minute segment, and we won the game there, right? But at the same time, I think those things stack up, and then it's what the coaches do on the court as well. And so if you can be really integrated with the staff, and then you can do those extra little things that really help out, that's where a strength coach affects the game overall, in my opinion. As going through that massage therapy process and getting licensed, do you feel like that kind of helped you gain a better understanding of anatomy as well?
Yeah. So I'll cut it short. I actually applied to medical school coming out of undergrad. And so I think one of the bases I always had was with anatomy. So in college, I was an anatomy and physiology major in undergrad. So, and then, I did all of my shadowing hours in orthopedics. And then kind of, so I think that's one of the things is I have a really good understanding of anatomy, right? And I have like in my mind still like every insertion of the rotator cuff and all of the different parts of the, quad and, pennation of fibers. And, I geek out on it. Obviously nothing I ever share to the guys because they'd be like, yo, what is Pat talking about? Um, and I'm thinking about it in the middle of the session, like when we're doing an external rotation exercise, like, oh, the degree of the arm abduction. All right, we're working more of the supraspinatus than the infraspinatus, things like that. I'm geeking out in my mind. But obviously the guys are going to be like, yo, this is like, what is he talking about? Right. So there's different ways to present it to the guys. And so obviously there's a big anatomy thing like that. I think when you start looking at like movement deficiencies, you see like, big things. And then when you're able to, be licensed to actually, touch the guys, right? That's a different connection and things like that. So I think a lot of the times, like with the guys, and it's been really, it's almost a way for me to serve them, right? And so when you look at like, if I'm doing a 30-minute massage on like our guys like lower limbs, right? And I'm in there, like at some point, like, we're doing some work on his foot and calf, and like a way for me to, I don't want to say like connect with him, but things like that. It's like, hey man, like this dude's really invested in my performance. And so then when I come back in the weight room and he asked me to put like 275 on and do a front squat, like I'm going to be a little bit more invested because, Pat's so invested in my body and in my performance, kind of, and things like that. So I definitely see like a return in that. And then from an anatomy side, like you feel like, the tension, and then you see like movement deficiencies, and then you start thinking about like, okay, like it's passive versus active. And, maybe there's like, maybe they need more strength training in that range of motion, but, maybe they have like tension in their fascia that needs to be broken up and released. And then we go back and train and then, learn to dominate that range of motion. And I think when you look at, our guys like mobility and things like that. And, as we're like, for example, it's January the 25th. All right. And we're going to do chain back squats all the way down today in Nordics. And we play Tulane on Saturday. It's Thursday. So I think like constantly being able to push these guys through a full range of motion. Right. And constantly being able to train hard is important. And then utilizing these things as tools to, you know, um, mold the fascia in the way that we want to, and then use our knowledge of anatomy to, impact our movement patterns is huge.
I think the biggest thing that you mentioned too is the relationship aspect of it, right? I mean, 1,000%. I think that helps you develop a better relationship. I get where you're coming from too. It's a little weird to say it in that way, right? When you're hands on a guy, but at the same time, like that absolutely shows your investment within it. Because I'll never forget when I first came here. We talked about walkthrough just before the show, right? It's 8:30 p.m. We have walkthrough, and like I came, and like first our head coach was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Dude, I just want to be here." It's not a big deal, right? And then I walked in, and then he's our leader, captain, team comedian as well. I walk in and he goes, "Oh, CA, dedication. I like that." He goes, "You show that you love us here, man." Like, joking, but behind every joke is a little bit of truth, right? Because they've never had a strength coach show up for those things before, right? And so I think, one, it helps show a different level of dedication to the players, but then to the coaching staff as well. It shows them that you're involved in that process. And then the cool things that I've noticed too is when you do extra things, there's more conversations that are had, and there's more things and more teaching moments that appear, right? And so I went to walk through all last year, and I never once asked to do a mobility session or anything like that. And then, this year, we talked with Justin King, the athletic trainer for Davidson men's basketball. He talked about reduction in their injuries, and a lot of it's behind extra mobility sessions. And so after our first walkthrough this year, I was like, "Hey, you guys want to stay back? And anybody wants to do extra mobility, hang around." And then that became a mandatory thing, right? And so I think it's good for strength coaches to hear this aspect too, because the more you insert yourself, the more people see that you're invested, and the more opportunity you have to actually make a difference and affect change, right? And so, I know I talk with other strength coaches who are like, "I'm there for the lifts and that's it." And if that's how you want to operate, that's totally fine, But I mean, for me personally, if I'm going to be involved with something, I want to be involved with it, right? I don't want to be, in my opinion, and I don't think it's half in, half out, but just how I would want to operate. I'd want to be the guy who is there and can affect it and make a change within the team. So I think that's exactly what you're doing with that.
Yeah, I think, those are, really good points. I think something that I learned in my first job at Jacksonville was like, when you're a head coach, you have so much on your mind, so much on your plate. And so, if you have a strength coach that's like constantly present in everything and you never have to worry about that aspect, they'll kind of let you run and do like with whatever you want, right? And so obviously, like, with that, there's great responsibility to, to educate yourself, to make sure that, you're constantly pushing the envelope on like, these are the best practices, these are the best things like that. But looking at it like these coaches are worried about like recruiting, and then like they have their parents calling them, and then they have a family too. They're worried about budget, right? Like, it's so many hats that the head coach has to wear. So if they're like, man, I don't worry about weights, it's just like whatever, Pat, like, right, like that's really relieving for them. So when you look at ways you can add value to a coaching staff, is being like when you're present at everything, and then having like and obviously, like, I meet with coach, and we set like a couple of goals of like, hey, I want to see this, I want to see that, things like that. But I think when you take really big ownership in your area of the performance side of things, and you really are like this is my strength and conditioning program, and I take great pride in like all of our guys getting results, and all of our guys being at like the peak shape that they need to be at. So if like whenever they are called, they are ready. Um, when you take great ownership in that, I think most coaches really appreciate it, because they're like, that's something that I don't have to worry about. So kind of like again, going through the interview process here, I was like, hey man, this is like how I do it, and I don't want us to get here, and in 3 months, like, you're upset, and like then I'm like, man, like, you're not letting me do my thing, like this is how I'm gonna do it. And if you don't want to do it, and if this isn't the way you want it done, that's great. Just then don't, let's save each other the time, and you find somebody that kind of aligns a lot more with your values and your goals for that position, if that makes sense.
That's a very, very key piece that I think when I talk, more with younger strength coaches, right? Because I'm a younger strength coach myself, but is trying to fit what you think the coach wants in the interviews, because you want the job, right? And I remember, this was when I was interviewing for this job here. He was like, "How do you like the weight room?" I was like, "I like it loud." I was like, I'm not like just my personal style. I like it to be loud. I like music to be blasting. I like guys to be having fun. I like smiles on their faces. Like, this is just how I operate. Because also, if I want to come in on a daily basis and enjoy my job and not get sick of doing, like you're saying, 4 separate groups, I want it to be a fun job. I want it to be somewhere where the guys come in and have fun. And so, my weight room looks a little bit different than some other people operate. I know Fitz, who we just talked about, might have a heart attack if he saw how my guys sometimes wrestle each other in the weight room and do those things, right? But at the same time, like, you're going to be miserable if you're not honest about those things, because if you give them the true answers and you guys fit, then it works out perfectly. And that's why I love it here so much, is because the men's coach, women's coach, and then the women's golf coach, like, I was very candid with him on exactly how I operate and how I run things. And two, it's also a confidence piece behind it as well, right? They can tell you're somebody who's true to yourself and you're going to do what you want to do. But it makes a massive difference on your enjoyment of the position that you have.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think you touched on a little bit there. It's just like, they'll be like, man, like, I really want this job. And right when you're going through that interview process, and it's like it's not going to work if it's not going to work. And so I think, like, just being honest, like, hey coach, like, this is how I want to do it. And if this is not what you're looking for, that's great. And like, let's kind of save each other the time, right? Because you hear all these stories of like, man, this person didn't get along with the head coach there, or like, this guy was like, and ultimately, when you look at, strength coaches that are really successful, they're a really good fit for that program. And so I think, like, establishing the fit, establishing like what the head coach wants, what they're looking for, plus like, the value that you can provide, getting that fit right is what's kind of ultimately determining like the longevity and the success of the sports performance coach on that side.
Yeah, man, absolutely. To me, it makes a world of difference, right? And then also, like you said too, like, this is what I operate on, and this is what I'm going to do. So there's no surprises when you ask to do certain things, right? Like, I remember, with the men's team here, and they have never done a conditioning test. Like, it was like it was like one conditioning session. It's called Pro Time, and then it's it for the week. And the first year I kind of just operated and went about it that way. But then I remember the second year I was like, hey, I really would like to do a conditioning test this off season, because it can give us some numbers that can really help me out. And it's just how I like doing those things, right? And like, I remember, like, the coach was like, I could see the gears turning in his head. He's like, what the fuck is this guy talking about right now? Like, it's just something he'd never done before, right? But again, with that development, with that buy-in piece, and then with being honest with the coach about who you are and what you want to do, like he allowed me to do it. And in my opinion, I think it's really helped us this year. Because we run the 30-15 IFT test in the off season, so uh, I think it, again, just benefits everybody overall. The enjoyment of your coach, and then the enjoyment of your job, and just be coming into work every day, because that could be a big burnout piece too. Like you said, you hear talk with other coaches, it's like almost never a problem with the athletes. I would be shocked if I heard something like that, and that was the reason why somebody left. It's administration or head coaches that they had to deal with. That's why a lot of people end up leaving the field. And so being true to yourself, I think, is a massive piece to it. The last thing I wanted to ask you about too, we did talk about the nutrition piece a little bit. I know you actually did specific continuing education on your nutrition side, but what was that certification, and how was that process for you as well?
Yeah, so from the certification, I have the NASM certified sports nutrition coach. I think like it's either that one or like the precision nutrition that everyone has, and um, I think utilizing those certifications are great, and you have to have some level of like, hey, like this is the certification. But I think from a practical experience, it's way more beneficial on the nutrition side. Like kind of seeing like, hey, these are I've picked meals now for 6 years for college basketball players, so like I know what the guys are going to like and what the guys are not going to like, right? I know what the guys are going to eat and what the guys are not going to eat. And so I think like utilizing, knowledge from that side, thinking about like, I'm in my head's running on like, okay, like, is that enough omega-6? Like how many carbohydrates are we getting? Weight, like, do we need to make sure we get more sodium in their pregame meal? Like I'm sitting there thinking like that, and they're like, oh, Pat got me chicken and sweet potatoes. All right. So, you have to be like the expert on it, and then you have to bring it at a level of like the guys, to understand like, hey, I need to eat a carbohydrate, I need to eat a high level of protein, and then from there I need to be able to hydrate to be able to perform. And so I think kind of just seeing overall like kind of um, what the guys will eat and what will actually move the needle, right? So you could put out the best spread from a nutritional standpoint out there, but if the guys don't eat it, it does not matter. So something I say all the time is like, when it comes to nutrition, like education is great, but intervention is way more important, right? So utilizing, putting the food in front of the guys is a lot more beneficial than educating them on what to eat, right? We want to empower the guys, and they got to make their own decisions, 10, 11 o'clock at night. But we're fortunate enough here to bring in our post practice meal every single day, and then our guys have like a dining for breakfast every single day. And so like I go with them all the time to breakfast, and it's really easy, man. Just sit there, eat with them. And I've done like you could do the little PowerPoint slide on nutrition, or however you want to educate them in those areas. But I think just making sure that our guys are prioritizing protein in the morning, right? We're gonna eat, and then they're gonna have their lunch. After they train with me, they're gonna get their shake, and I dose the carbohydrate through a couple different supplements based off of where they're at from a body composition and body weight goal, right? And then from there we do our post practice meal, and then kind of like talking to those guys about like, hey, here's a lot of great options outside of practice. So I think like one of our bigs, our starting center, he's a great player for us. He came in my first day here, August 24th. He was 294 and a half, and he had sat out last season due to a heart attack, and so he obviously was like really like in a situation, and you'll see it last, I guess 2 nights ago, he played 33 minutes. And I had like a little tear roll down. I was like, man, I'm so proud. Like, because he finally got him safe. And so from 294 and a half to now he weighs 266. And like that was in the matter of 3 months. And it was literally just a constant intervention, right? So like I'd FaceTime him on a Saturday night, and I'd be like, hey man, what you eating? Right. And not in the way of like, like over like hawking over him, but ultimately, having a relationship with him and being able to, kind of have those conversations, and then, utilizing knowledge that you have from a certification standpoint, and right. And, macronutrients and things like that, but then also utilizing like practical, like, hey, I know the guys are going to eat this. Right. And I know that, things are going to roll by through that. And I think like, I might be, a little bit, different from like a typical RD, right? Like I'm not that big on carbohydrates as much as, a lot of people are, especially processed sugars, things like that. We eat a lot of rice. We eat a lot of potatoes. Those are constant staples. We don't do a whole lot of pasta. Obviously, I don't let the guys have Powerade in the locker room unless it's like in the middle of practice, right? And so I think like, kind of being out there a little bit, like, right, like I'll contact all of our hotels that we're staying at, and I'll make sure that, I set all the menus up with them, but I don't do seed oils during on all our meals. I make sure it's cooked in an olive oil or like in a avocado oil, things like that. And I think, they're obviously to be able to, make decisions about those things, right? Like it's hard because I think like, there's certain, research that might promote like certain things like that. But I think ultimately just, prioritizing heavy amounts of protein, right? Having our guys eat a lot of red meat, having our guys eat chicken, fish, all these different things, right? Utilizing carbohydrates that are, in my world would be non-inflammatory, from like a rice, potato, things like that. And then utilizing, our fruits and vegetables and hydrating really well has kind of allowed our team to get, fairly lean and allow us to, I think, perform better. And I think, it's a give and a take, right? Like not every meal is 1,000%, perfect, chicken, broccoli, rice. But being able to, kind of be able to make those decisions, be involved in that process has been something that's been a game changer.
We brought up autonomy earlier too. I've noticed in that situation, autonomy is like the number one thing for me, because we brought in post practice shakes as well, and our guys, like, you wouldn't believe how many people hate mango and how many people love mango at the exact same time. And so now it's like just give them the choice, because I've got some guys who need a different shake every single day, and I've got some guys who will literally not drink anything but the strawberry shakes that we make, and so I think when you do give them those choices, right, even if it's between two things that they may not necessarily prefer when they're kind of going through that process of learning how to eat better, it still does kind of give them that ownership a little bit on that end too. Makes it just a little bit better. But I think the key piece that you said too is always that relationship aspect behind it, because there are things that are kind of touchy subjects within the strength and conditioning world. Because I weigh my guys every day too. But it's about your reaction to it too. It's not, it's about how when they step on the scale and they gain the pound, you're not like, oh my God, I can't believe, like it's about, okay, and noticing, like you said, the trends, but then having that relationship where it's not the controlling aspect of it too, I think makes a massive difference on that end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, but Pat, man, I've really enjoyed it. I could talk to you for about 3 hours, so I won't take up that much of your time. But, if anybody here wants to reach out to you or wants to follow you on social media, what would be the best way to do that?
Typically on Instagram, and then my handle is Coach Pat Lewis. Pretty no underscores, no symbols, no numbers. So just kind of straightforward on that.
That's a rare one. That's awesome.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, man. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate your time.